the most important advice we give those people is that you're never too early. Putting those things in place, even though you may not have the assets behind them, is a great foundation for everything that's going to come, down the road.
Hi there, and welcome back to the Trust Exchange podcast series, proudly presented by Norway Savings Asset Management Group. And without further ado, we're going to go around the table and say hello to everyone.
Yeah, Jake Ouellette. I'm a Vice President and Investment Officer here with the group. In my 11th year with the team, 12th year at the bank. I'm a Chartered Retirement Planning Counselor and an accredited Fiduciary Investment Manager.
I'm Keysha Wright. I am a Trust Officer and Relationship Manager, and I have been with Norway Savings Bank since 2019.
I'm Brian Bernier. I'm a Certified Financial Planner. I've been with Norway Savings for 27 years, worked as an investment officer here in the Asset Management Group now for 12 years.
Let's delve into this here with the lay of the land with the country right now. We look at an older generation, we look at a younger generation, and we look at the millennials coming up. So let's look at the current status of this.
When you're working with folks who are maybe closer to retirement or are retired, it's going to be different. The way they're going to look at estate planning is certainly going to be different than maybe their kids, the next generation. And what they're thinking about usually is more kind of legacy, and it's, I want to leave, if they have a business, maybe they want to leave that business to a family member and they hope the business continues to thrive. Maybe they're thinking about their real estate. Maybe there's a family camp. They want to keep that in the family forever. So they're thinking, what can I do to keep that in the family forever? And when you take that and then you look at their kids, the next generation, the kids are probably thinking about that family camp. Do I want that or not? Do we want that? Maybe they're thinking about the business. Do we want to do that business or maybe we don't? And they're then thinking about their kids. And so they're probably more focused on, I need to pay for my kids' college at some point. I'm saving for that. And maybe they have a house at this point and they need a bigger one, or maybe they're saving for a house. So it's really two different views of the same thing. What's going to happen in the long term with your assets?
So how do you nurture the older generation, Keysha, as opposed to the younger generation? What kind of is there a different strategic approach to this?
I personally think that with the older generation, you can see that they might have an understanding that there is going to require a little bit more planning. With the younger generation, I think that they might fall victim to that maybe a will is just enough to have. And, well, a will is a really good, clear roadmap of what happens after death. I think that an estate plan can be a strategic plan on how things can move forward to the next generations.
What are some of the big challenges right now, Jake, between older and younger generations here in this subject matter?
I guess maybe even to take a step back, it's sort of meeting people where they're at right now. We might all, over the course of our life, have the same issues or estate planning needs, but it's meeting the client where they are today. So I think from a millennial, I am a millennial, so maybe I can speak pretty comfortably to them. It's meeting them where they are, showing them the importance of sort of here's where you're at today, and these are the things that are going to be important to you in the future and why these things matter. But also speaking directly to, look, so if this is where you are, these are some of the things you should be thinking about that maybe you aren't, that will help you in the right now. So giving them that call to action that there is, even though you might not think it, there are some very meaningful things here for you to start today, and let's get to work on them.
I think that's really great, really well. Both of you said some really great points. That call to action, a lot of times I find is, have you talked to your kids about this? So when you're dealing with that older generation, and probably half the time they haven't, and they've just spent maybe 45 minutes or an hour talking with me about what they want to do, how they want to leave things. And they've never mentioned it to the kids and who they're leaving them to. And what's hard, where there's a difference, Norm, you asked about what's different, where there can be a real difference is mom and dad are looking at it in a very different light. Mom and dad when they grew up, the expectation was, you're going to buy a home, you're going to raise your family, you're going to have, maybe it's your business or maybe it's your career, maybe you don't own your own business, but you work. And they're thinking that's what our kids are going to do. And if you look at the world today, things are different. And their kids may not be looking at that at all. Or maybe their kids are saying, yeah, we're doing that, but not the way you did it. And those conversations seem very unimportant, and if you don't kind of go deeper into them, but what you find is it can really create a lot of stress and sometimes heartache when it does come time to start transferring assets and no one's clear on what should happen, what was expected to happen, what wanted to happen, or they just don't agree on what's going to happen. And having those family conversations ahead of time can really go a long ways to heading that off.
Yeah, there seems to be a huge generation gap. I mean, between what we're talking about with the older people, elderly people who might come in and speak with you about this, as opposed to the millennials or Gen Z here. So to Jake's point, you've got to step it back. You've got to find a happy medium. Isn't that right, Keysha?
Yeah, I completely agree. Meeting people where they're at is a great way to phrase that. I think that although you can find similarities in a lot of what drives people forward, I think it's good to acknowledge the differences and what's available to you at the times that you're at. So whether older generations are more about protecting their assets and younger generations really do need to think about their kids and, what's moving forward directly in front of them.
And I think just to make sure I answer your question, I think from the millennial perspective, I think a lot of what I hear or see with clients and their families is they think I have to do it just like mom and dad did, right? Speaking to them directly, like re-emphasizing that there's a relationship that I have with you and that you can do things your own way, and here's how I would start. I think the roadmap for millennials doesn't have to be your way or the specific way or whatever your family did before you. It's what's important to you, and let's build a plan that's going to work for you.
Regardless of age or generation, it all comes down to the general basic steps, right? To get started, beginning with take stock of all your assets, right? And then we move on from there. And how do you move on from there with that?
Boy, so I'm going to keep going back to communication, conversation and communication. So if you're talking with a couple and they're trying to figure out their estate plan and simply, what does that mean? What do we want to happen to our things, all of our belongings when we pass? Who do we want to get those? So they need to talk about that, and they need to be on the same page. And that's not always the case. You may find that they have different desires for how things are going to go. So you've got mom and dad talking, trying to figure out how are we going to do this. And then, again, pulling the kids into that conversation and explaining this is what we'd like to do and this is why. It can be heartbreaking to be in the room and listening to people argue about what mom and dad wanted when mom and dad are gone. And so now you've got siblings and maybe siblings and spouses and not agreeing on what mom and dad wanted when it could have been spelled out. And that's where we really we take a lot of time. We put a lot of work into helping people spell that out and work with an attorney and get this put together so it's clear.
Follow-up question posed is, how do you navigate them through this?
Yeah. So when you're dealing with somebody who's having a hard time struggling with their siblings and trying to figure out what did mom and dad really want when maybe it's vague, maybe they did have a will in place, but it wasn't well written. One of the things we will do is review wills for our clients to make sure it does what they want it to do. And so when you're dealing with that, it's nice to be a third party and that you can maybe, kind of create some space, if you will, maybe de-escalate some feelings and try and help the kids understand this is what we're working with. Mom and dad, either maybe they didn't put together a will or maybe they did and it's not clear. So let's kind of go back to the basics and kind of look at what are we talking about? A lot of times a family camp is a great example. A family camp will, mom and dad want to hand it down to the next generation, and to find out the next generation doesn't want it. And while mom and dad are alive, no one's saying anything because they know that's going to break mom and dad's heart. So mom and dad finally pass, and now this camp is transitioning to maybe 2 or 3 siblings who don't even live in the state, and nobody wants it, and they want to sell it. And then there can certainly be hard feelings on how that wholesale processes and progresses. And for us to just keep kind of reminding them, it's a camp. It's okay if you want to sell that, and let's get a realtor in here, and let's find out what it's worth, and go through the process. And it's just sort of that, take a deep breath and try and be that third party that can just help them navigate.
And to the millennials who are watching these podcasts and getting educated here, I mean, what's the best advice for them? Do you have any anecdotes of any of the younger generation coming in and speaking to you for advice? And you said, well, these this group is kind of wise beyond their years here. They understand what's going on. So let's continue our conversation.
I think it's good to designate guardians for your children. I think it's a hard topic to think about that you might not be there, but you never know what's going to happen. And making sure that they've got someone who's going to care for them because, just in case if, you're there one day and gone the next.
And some of these millennials who come in might not even understand what a fiduciary is. So you explain to them, and that's a calming factor, knowing that, you have their best interests at heart.
It really is. It's, when you explain to them what it is, they hear you. They say, okay, you said you're going to put my needs ahead of yours. So that's what we're always doing. It is really rewarding when we work with someone, a great example, a young guy, I guess he would have been a millennial. His dad was he was a hard worker, and he had managed to buy a lot of land. He had amassed quite a bit of land. He was starting to sell the land because he knew he wasn't going to live forever. So he was building up financial assets, but most of his money was in real estate. Dad died suddenly and left everything to this kid. And I say kid, this young adult. And so the son now has a lot of money and also knows that he's going to have a lot of land. And his first thought, one of the first times when I spoke with him, he was trying to think of different businesses he wanted to start. And I'm coming at it as a fiduciary looking at him, and I'm looking at it for long term thinking, Dad has really set you up for some really nice long-term success with money that you can have forever. Definitely if we're going to start a business, that's fine if you're going to do that. However, keep in mind, maybe don't spend it all immediately. Let's look long-term, and let's save some money for rainy day. Let's save some money for retirement at some point. And I think we bring a lot to the table with that because we can help them understand it's more than just won the lottery. Let's go crazy.
Yeah, and Keysha, the bottom line is this: regardless of how old one is who's coming in to discuss, your expertise can also help anyone avoid making costly mistakes in a very complicated matter to their heirs.
Absolutely. I think it's important to remember that estate planning isn't necessarily all about death. It's about control. It's about what you want to happen. Even if you are incapacitated, you want to have a plan in place because if you don't, the state will.
Yeah. Well, final thoughts, Jake. Some of the what sticks out the most to you here about this?
We've heard it a lot today and throughout the course of our team discussing this, but you're never too early to get started. Have those conversations with the people that you trust, the team that you have around you, so that you can set yourself up today for success in the future.
I think it's good to have faith in yourself to ask questions and make sure that if you are thinking that your plan isn't correctly complete, that there's resources out there that you can reach out to.
Talk to your family, talk to each other about what you hope, what your goals are, and work with a fiduciary, like we talked about. Like where as a fiduciary, they're looking out for your best interest. So work with them to make sure that the estate plan you build is the one that you want.
Yeah, estate planning basics, it can be generational, and it has to be generational. And that's it for this Trust Exchange podcast series, presented proudly by Norway Savings Asset Management Group, AMG. We thank you for joining this particular podcast with us, and we'll see you on our next episode.